The sound of my mother's voice that March evening will forever be etched in my memory, not because it was loud, but because it was eerily calm, cold, definitive, the kind of voice that leaves no room for negotiation or hope. If you walk out that door to go to medical school orientation tomorrow, don't bother coming back. I stood in our cramped living room, my acceptance letter to the University of Michigan Medical School clutched in my trembling hands, staring at the woman who had raised me to believe I could accomplish anything. Except apparently, this. My name is Dr. Sophia Martinez now, but back then I was just Sophie, a 22-year-old pre-med graduate who had worked 3 jobs throughout college to maintain a perfect GPA and score in the 95th percentile on the MCAT. I had spent countless nights in the library, sacrificed social events and relationships, and taken out massive student loans to pursue what I knew was my calling. But none of that seemed to matter to my mother. "Mija, you're throwing your life away," she continued, her accent thick with emotion despite her controlled tone. "Doctors work themselves to death. They have no families, no real lives. I didn't raise you to become some cold, heartless person in a white coat." The irony was suffocating. My mother, Carmen, had immigrated from Guatemala with nothing but hope and determination. She'd worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families, sometimes holding down 3 cleaning jobs simultaneously, so that my sister Rosa and I could have opportunities she'd never had. Education was everything to her, until suddenly, it wasn't. "You can have a good career without killing yourself," she pressed on. "Teaching, nursing, even business. But being a doctor, it will consume you. You'll lose yourself, lose your family. I've seen it happen." I knew exactly what she was referencing. Dr. Patricia Vega, the daughter of one of my mother's former employers, had become a successful cardiac surgeon, but had recently gone through a bitter divorce and rarely saw her children. In my mother's mind, this single example represented the inevitable fate of all women in medicine. "Mom, that's one person's story," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That doesn't mean it has to be mine. I can be a doctor and still have a life, still be close to my family." "No, you can't." The calm facade cracked, revealing the fear and frustration beneath. "You think you're so much smarter than everyone else, so much better than this family. Well, go ahead then. Chase your fancy dreams, but don't expect us to watch you destroy yourself." My father, Miguel, sat silently at our kitchen table, his calloused hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He'd been laid off from his construction job 3 months earlier and had been unusually quiet ever since. I could see him struggling with the conflict between supporting his wife and wanting what was best for his daughter. "Papa?" I asked quietly, hoping he might bridge the gap between us. He looked up at me with tired eyes. "Your mother is scared, Mija. We both are. Medical school costs so much money. What if you fail? What if you graduate and can't find work? We've seen what debt does to families." "I have scholarships, loans with good terms, a solid plan." "Plans change," my mother interrupted sharply. "Dreams crash, reality hits, and when it does, you'll be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt with nothing to show for it." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything I was about to lose. My younger sister Rosa, who was 15 and had always looked up to me, sat on the stairs listening to our argument. Her eyes were wide with the kind of confusion that comes from watching your family fall apart over something you don't fully understand. "I'm not asking you to pay for medical school," I said carefully. "I'm not asking for money or financial support. I'm just asking for your belief in me, your encouragement, your love while I pursue something that means everything to me." "Love?" My mother laughed bitterly. "Love is protecting your children from making mistakes that will ruin their lives. Love is telling them the truth, even when they don't want to hear it. And what truth is that? That you're not cut out for this. That you're setting yourself up for failure and heartbreak. That medicine is a man's world that will chew you up and spit you out." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Not cut out for this? I had excelled in every science course I'd taken, volunteered hundreds of hours at local hospitals, shadowed physicians across multiple specialties, and consistently demonstrated both the academic ability and emotional resilience required for medical training. But more than the academic dismissal, what hurt most was the implication that I was abandoning my family, my culture, my values by pursuing medicine. In my mother's mind, my ambition had transformed from something to be proud of into something shameful and selfish. I need to think. I said quietly, heading toward my bedroom. There's nothing to think about, she called after me. Either you give up this ridiculous idea or you give up this family. Those are your choices. That night, I lay in my childhood bed staring at my acceptance letter by moonlight. I thought about the little girl who had bandaged her dolls and dreamed of healing people. I remembered the high school volunteer work at the children's hospital, watching doctors save lives and knowing with absolute certainty that this was my path. I considered the sacrifices I'd already made, the determination that had carried me through years of preparation. I also thought about my family, the mother who had worked herself to the bone to give me opportunities, the father who had taught me the value of hard work and perseverance, the sister who needed to see that dreams were worth fighting for. By morning, I had made my decision. I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Everything else, my childhood books, photos, mementos from high school, would have to stay behind. I left a note on my pillow thanking my parents for everything they had given me and promising that I would make them proud, even if they couldn't see it yet. Rosa was waiting by the front door when I came downstairs. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Don't forget about us," she whispered. "Never," I promised. "And don't let anyone tell you that your dreams are too big or too dangerous. Promise me." She nodded solemnly, and I kissed her forehead. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, face set in stone. My father remained at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "This is your choice," my mother said flatly. "Don't come crawling back when it all falls apart." I picked up my suitcases and walked out of the only home I'd ever known, closing the door on my childhood and stepping into an uncertain but determined future. The taxi ride to the bus station was quiet, except for the sound of my own heartbeat and the rustle of my acceptance letter, which I held like a lifeline. I was 22 years old, essentially homeless, and about to begin the most challenging educational journey of my life. But I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I was going to become a doctor, with or without my family's support. What I didn't know was that 3 years later, everything would change, and the very medical knowledge they had dismissed would become the thing that brought us back together. Medical school was everything my mother had warned me it would be, and nothing like she'd feared. Yes, it was demanding, exhausting, and often overwhelming, but it wasn't the soul-crushing, family-destroying experience she had imagined. Instead, it became the foundation for the person I was meant to be. Those first few months in Ann Arbor were the loneliest of my life. I lived in a tiny studio apartment near campus, surviving on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at student events. My classmates seemed to have supportive families who visited for Parents' Weekend, sent care packages, and called regularly to check in. I had silence. I tried calling home twice during my first semester. Both times my mother hung up as soon as she heard my voice. The rejection stung, but I refused to let it derail my focus. If anything, it fueled my determination to prove that her fears were unfounded. Dr. Patricia Chen, my anatomy professor, became an unexpected mentor during those difficult early months. She noticed me staying late in the lab, working alone while other students studied in groups, and she invited me to join her research team. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me one evening as we reviewed cardiac dissection specimens. "Brilliant, driven, and carrying the weight of family expectations, or in your case, family disappointment, on your shoulders. How did you handle it?" I asked. "By proving them wrong through excellence, compassion, and balance." My parents also thought medicine would make me cold and distant. Instead, it made me more empathetic, more connected to human suffering and healing than I'd ever been. Dr. Chen introduced me to other physicians who had overcome similar family opposition. Dr. James Rodriguez, a pediatric surgeon whose parents had wanted him to take over their restaurant business. Dr. Sarah Kim, an emergency medicine physician whose traditional Korean parents had disowned her for choosing medicine over marriage. Each of them had found ways to excel in their careers while maintaining rich personal lives and strong connections to their communities. The secret, Dr. Rodriguez told me during one of our mentorship dinners, is intentionality. You have to be deliberate about creating the life you want outside of medicine. It won't happen by accident. I took his advice to heart. Despite my grueling schedule, I joined a community service organization that provided health screenings at local Hispanic community centers. I volunteered at free clinics on weekends. I learned to cook traditional Guatemalan dishes from videos online, maintaining my connection to my cultural heritage, even as I embraced my medical education. Most importantly, I stayed in touch with Rosa through social media and occasional text messages. She was now a senior in high school, working hard in her AP classes and talking about college applications. Through our carefully hidden conversations, I learned that my parents rarely mentioned me, but that my absence had created a palpable sadness in our household. Mom cries sometimes when she thinks no one is looking, Rosa confided during one of our secret phone calls. And Dad keeps asking if I've heard from you. What do you tell them? Nothing. But Sophia, I think they miss you more than they want to admit. By my 3rd year of medical school, I was thriving academically and personally. I had developed strong friendships with my classmates, maintained excellent grades, and begun to specialize in family medicine, a choice that felt like a perfect blend of my desire to help people and my commitment to preserving family connections. My clinical rotations reinforced everything I loved about medicine. In the pediatric ward, I comforted sick children and educated anxious parents. In the emergency room, I learned to make quick decisions under pressure while maintaining empathy and clear communication. During my family medicine rotation, I provided care for entire multi-generational families, often serving as both physician and cultural bridge for immigrant patients who reminded me of my own background. You have a gift for connecting with patients, Dr. Amanda Foster, my family medicine attending, observed during one of my evaluations. They trust you immediately, and you have an intuitive understanding of how family dynamics affect health and healing. It was during my family medicine rotation that I began to understand how my own family's fear and misunderstanding had shaped our conflict. Many of my patients came from traditional backgrounds where medical careers were viewed with suspicion or seen as incompatible with cultural values. I spent countless hours educating families about the role of physicians in their communities, showing them that healing could be both scientifically rigorous and deeply compassionate. One patient in particular, Mrs. Esperanza Gutierrez, reminded me so much of my mother that our conversations often felt like practice sessions for reconciliation. She was a Guatemalan immigrant whose daughter wanted to become a nurse, and she was terrified that medical training would change her daughter's personality and priorities. Doctora, she said during one visit, using the title I hadn't yet earned but that she insisted on giving me, you are proof that a woman can help people without losing her heart. My daughter, she could be like you. Those words meant more to me than any academic honor or clinical achievement. They confirmed that the path I had chosen was not just personally fulfilling, but could serve as an example for other families facing similar conflicts. As my 4th year approached and I began applying for family medicine residencies, I found myself thinking more often about home. Rosa was preparing for college, having been accepted to several universities with plans to study public health, a choice that apparently caused less family turmoil than my medical career had. She wants to help people too, Rosa told me during one of our calls, but Mom says public health is safer than medicine, less demanding, more family-friendly. I laughed, knowing that public health could be just as demanding as clinical medicine, but appreciating that my sister had found a path that satisfied both her desire to serve others and our parents' need for security. What does she say about me these days? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She doesn't say much, but last month when Mrs. Hernandez from church was bragging about her son getting into law school, I heard Mom mumble something about having a daughter in medical school too. She said that? Yeah. And then she looked really sad and went to her room. I was about to graduate from medical school with honors, having been selected for a competitive family medicine residency at a hospital that served a largely Hispanic population. I had proven that medical training could enhance rather than diminish my connection to my cultural heritage and community values. I had demonstrated that excellence in medicine was compatible with empathy, family loyalty, and personal happiness. But none of that mattered if my family couldn't see it. 2 weeks before my graduation ceremony, I made a decision that terrified me. I sent my mother a graduation announcement with a handwritten note. Mom, I know you believe that medical school changed me, and you're right. It made me more compassionate, more committed to serving others, and more grateful for the sacrifices you and Papa made to give me opportunities. I'm graduating with honors and beginning a residency where I'll provide health care to families like ours. I hope someday you'll be proud of the doctor you helped create. I love you. Sophie. I never received a response. But 3 months into my residency, as I was settling into my new role as Dr. Martinez, my phone rang at 2 a.m. with news that would change everything. It was Rosa, and she was crying. Sophia, you need to come home. It's Mom. Something's wrong, and the doctors here don't know what to do. The irony was devastating and perfect. After 3 years of silence, My family needed exactly what they had rejected. A doctor who understood both medicine and their culture, their fears, their language. They needed me. I drove through the night from Detroit to Chicago, my hands gripping the steering wheel as Rosa's words echoed in my mind. The doctors say it could be her heart, but they're not sure. She won't tell them about her symptoms, and she doesn't trust them. Sofia, she keeps asking for una doctora que nos entienda, a doctor who understands us. A doctor who understands us. After 3 years of radio silence, my mother was asking for exactly what I had become. I arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital at 6 a.m., still in my scrubs from the night shift I'd abandoned at the last minute. Rosa was sitting in the waiting room with my father, both of them looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. When Rosa saw me, she ran into my arms. "Thank God you're here," she whispered. "She's been asking for you." My father stood slowly, his hair noticeably grayer than when I'd last seen him. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the waiting room. Then he crossed the space between us and pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. "Mija," he said quietly, "your mother is scared. The doctors here, they're good, but they don't understand her. She won't tell them everything." I nodded, understanding immediately. In our culture, there's often a mistrust of authority figures, especially in medical settings where language barriers and cultural differences can create misunderstandings. My mother would be polite and deferential to the attending physicians, but she wouldn't share the full picture of her symptoms or fears. "What have they told you so far?" I asked, slipping into my professional mode. "Chest pain, shortness of breath, some kind of irregular heartbeat," Rosa explained. "They've done tests, but they keep saying they need more information from her." I spoke with the attending cardiologist, Dr. Williams, introducing myself as both family member and physician. He was clearly relieved to have someone who could bridge the communication gap. "Your mother is presenting with atypical chest pain and palpitations," he explained. "Her EKG shows some irregularities, but she's been reluctant to describe her symptoms in detail. She keeps saying she's fine and wants to go home." Classic. My mother would endure significant discomfort rather than appear weak or demanding to medical professionals she viewed as authority figures. "May I speak with her?" I asked. "Please. Maybe she'll open up to you." Walking into my mother's hospital room felt like stepping back in time and forward into my future simultaneously. There she was, small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that confirmed what the medical team suspected, but couldn't prove without her cooperation. "Mija?" Her voice was weak but filled with surprise and something that might have been relief. "Sí, Mama. I'm here." I sat beside her bed and took her hand, noting the slight tremor and coolness that suggested circulation issues. "Tell me what's been happening. Everything. Don't worry about the other doctors. Talk to me." And then, for the first time in years, my mother really talked to me. She described weeks of chest tightness that she'd dismissed as stress, episodes of heart racing that she'd attributed to too much coffee, shortness of breath during her cleaning jobs that she'd blamed on aging, dizziness and fatigue that she'd hidden from the family because she didn't want to worry anyone. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared that if I went to the doctor, they would find something terrible. Scared that if I couldn't work, the family would suffer. Scared that I was being weak." As she talked, I performed a gentle but thorough assessment, using skills I'd developed during my cardiology rotation. Her pulse was irregular, her blood pressure elevated, and she had subtle signs of fluid retention that suggested heart failure. But more importantly, I could see the fear in her eyes. Not just fear of illness, but fear of being misunderstood, dismissed, or judged by medical professionals who didn't share her cultural background. "Mama," I said gently, "I think you're having some heart problems that are very treatable. But I need you to trust me and work with Dr. Williams to figure out exactly what's going on." "Will you stay?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "Will you help me understand what they're saying?" "Of course." For the next 3 days, I essentially lived at the hospital, serving as translator, advocate, and bridge between my mother and her medical team. I helped her understand the diagnostic procedures, explained the medications in terms that made sense to her, and ensured that her cultural concerns and preferences were incorporated into her treatment plan. The diagnosis was dilated cardiomyopathy, a condition where the heart muscle becomes weakened and enlarged, often due to a combination of genetic factors, hypertension, and stress. It was serious but manageable with proper treatment and lifestyle changes. "Your daughter saved your life," Dr. Williams told my mother during discharge planning. "If she hadn't convinced you to be honest about your symptoms, We might have missed this entirely. But the real healing wasn't happening in my mother's heart chambers. It was happening in our relationship. On the second evening, as we sat together in her hospital room, she finally addressed the elephant between us. "Sophia, I was wrong," she said quietly. "Not just about medicine, but about you. I was so afraid of losing you to this career that I lost you anyway." "Mama." "No, let me finish. I watched you this week. How you talked to the nurses. How you explained things to me and Papa. How you made Dr. Williams understand our family better. You didn't become cold or heartless. You became more of who you always were. Someone who cares about people, who wants to help, who sees each person as a whole human being." Tears were streaming down both our faces. "I was scared that medical school would take away my daughter and give me back a stranger," she continued. "Instead, it gave me back my daughter with superpowers." I laughed despite my tears. Superpowers? The power to heal, to understand, to help people like us feel safe and cared for in scary places like this. Mrs. Gutierrez from church, she told me about a young Latina doctor at the community clinic who speaks Spanish and understands our families. That was you, wasn't it? I nodded, amazed that word of my volunteer work had somehow reached my mother. "I've been proud of you every single day for 3 years," she said. "But I was too stubborn and scared to admit I was wrong." The reconciliation wasn't immediate or complete. 3 years of silence and hurt couldn't be erased in a few hospital conversations. But it was a beginning. My father apologized for not standing up to my mother's ultimatum. Rosa cried with relief that our family could finally be whole again. Most importantly, my mother became my biggest advocate. She started telling everyone at church about mi hija, la doctora, and began volunteering at the community clinic where I provided weekend care. She translated for Spanish-speaking patients and helped them navigate the healthcare system with the same fierce protection she'd once used to try to keep me away from medicine. 6 months later, at my residency graduation ceremony, my entire family sat in the front row. My mother wore a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion and carried a sign that read, "My daughter, the doctor," in both Spanish and English. During my graduation speech, I talked about the importance of family in medicine, how healing happens not just through technical knowledge, but through understanding, cultural competence, and the ability to see patients as whole human beings embedded in family systems and cultural contexts. "My mother taught me that lesson," I said, looking directly at her in the audience. "She showed me that sometimes the people who love us most express that love through fear, and that our job as healers is to transform fear into understanding, isolation into connection, and conflict into compassion." After the ceremony, as we celebrated at Rosa's favorite restaurant, my mother pulled me aside. "Mija, I have a confession," she said with a mischievous smile. "I never really thought you would fail at medical school. I was just terrified you would succeed and become someone I couldn't understand or relate to. And now I know that success made you more yourself, not less, and I'm sorry it took a heart attack for me to see that." "It wasn't a heart attack, Mama. It was cardiomyopathy." She laughed. "See? You're teaching me even now." Today, 5 years later, I'm an attending family medicine physician at a federally qualified health center that serves predominantly Latino families. My mother volunteers there twice a week, and my father has become the unofficial community advocate who helps families navigate insurance and social services. Rosa graduated from Northwestern with a degree in public health and is now applying to medical schools herself, with my parents' enthusiastic support. 2 doctors in the family, my mother bragged to our neighbor last week. Imagine that. I still keep the letter I wrote to myself during those lonely first months of medical school. Someday they'll understand that choosing medicine wasn't about rejecting my family. It was about expanding my capacity to serve families like ours. Someday turned out to be a heart condition and 3 years of stubborn silence. But it was worth the wait. Sometimes the people who love you most need to see you save them before they understand that you were always trying to save others.